Well, hi there, and welcome to Your Life Matters. Glad to have you on tonight as we talk about a very interesting subject. I have my lovely wife, Debbie, here with me tonight, and she is going to be explaining a little bit about her journey and our journey together, because obviously I support her in the area of depression. This has been something that she has dealt with for a long, long time, and I remember we were on a vacation trip. Hey, Jimmy. We were on a vacation trip to Myrtle Beach, and we were there. I think we'd been married. Maybe it was our first summer that we'd been married. And Debbie came to me and she said, "There's something I've got to tell you." And she just looked, hi, Peggy. She just looked so distraught that she was having to let me know about this. And she said, I suffer with depression. And I didn't find that unusual at all, because I sort of had the sense that she had suffered with depression before that. But Debbie, tell us a little bit about that. Why was that such a significant time for you to mention that to me?
Well, I don't remember back quite that far, but I know that I was having a struggle during that vacation, and I felt like I needed to share that with you. I think, like you said, you already had some ideas that was going on. But my depression really started, I think, in my teenage years, and it was very mild. I had just periods of time where I didn't feel very worthy. And then in my 20s, I think, as I started having children, I had postpartum depression with both of my children. So
now, does that differ from clinical depression, or is it one and the same?
Clinically, I don't know, but I know that it wasn't a coincidence. I don't think that I had postpartum depression with
They
my
probably
children.
go hand in hand.
Yeah, I felt probably pretty unworthy as a mother, and not sufficient enough for my children, and just the unworthiness I think I felt is...
But that sort of goes with motherhood, don't you think? With your first children, everybody kind of feels that way, that you don't know what you're doing and you're flying by the seat of your pants. But knowing that later you would be diagnosed with depression, I think added to that.
I think so. And I think chemically, I have a chemical imbalance. I have always had, I think. And I think chemically, when my hormones after birth were raging, that just kicked in, and it was just sort of a normal thing for me to have gone through at that time. But when I started into my 30s and my 40s and on, I had to go into the medication route, and I started the medications with my GP and my family doctor. And I look back on it now, I would get to feeling better, and so I would take myself off the medication.
Now, what were some of those, like Prozac?
Prozac was the first one I think I ever took, but I've been on so many different ones over the years, because after about 2 years, my antidepressants sometimes want to stop working for me, and
your body gets used to them.
It does, and they have to change. But my point was that in going to my GP and my family doctor, looking back at it now, that was not the best solution for me. Eventually I got to a point where my GP referred me to a psychiatrist. Now that sounds really terrible. And it's
psychiatrists are not what you think they are. Let's define that a little bit.
It really was for the sole purpose of getting my medications regulated correctly. Now that I'm as old as I am, I'm having trouble with sleeping, as many times older people do, and so sleep medication comes into that picture as well, and they all need to coordinate: the anti-anxiety, the antidepressants, the sleep medications. And I think, my opinion is, it's too much for a GP and a family doctor to know all the different medications and the side effects and how they work together and this kind of thing. It's just best, in my opinion, to get a psychiatrist to manage meds for depression patients.
And psychiatrists don't necessarily counsel you.
They don't.
That's a whole different ballgame. Counselors and
therapists are who you go to
For depression,
for your
yeah.
talk therapy.
Right. So
Yes.
there's different areas. So when someone says they're going to a psychiatrist, all that person's doing is really monitoring their medicines.
That's correct.
And making sure that they don't interact. Because most people, especially our age, you have a general practitioner and then you have other doctors that you see for other things. So one doesn't know what the other's always prescribing.
Right.
And so that's why the psychiatrist is important, especially for someone who
I think
suffers with
it's
depression.
absolutely key
Yeah.
in treating depression. And the depression, I want to talk a little bit about how you know that you've got depression, how you can suspect that. If you feel tired all the time, if you want to sleep a lot, if you feel unworthy, and of course you can go all the way to the extremes of you feel like harming yourself or ending your life. That's on the extreme end of it. I have not had that issue, but I have had the sleeplessness and or the sleeping all the time, no energy, absolutely no energy. People would just tell me, just get up out of bed and do something. And you know, if I could do that, I would have.
And to give you a little backstory, Debbie was in the bed for 8 years. She only got up to go to the bathroom and go to the doctor. I mean, everything else she did, she just lived in the bed. And you call that your safe place.
Yes.
That has something to do with it too, the safety.
Those are some of my issues in feeling safe from people who have hurt me in the past. And I want to feel safe, and I feel like in my home, in my bedroom, in my bed, I'm the safest place that I can possibly be from people who might hurt me. And I don't mean physically hurt me, I mean emotionally hurt me. But this comes from a lot of years of being hurt by people. And
So you think those go hand in hand, or are those
they
separate
do for
issues?
me. They do for me. I think it's at the core of my depression.
Yeah.
Is what I think. But
So now how did when you first felt like you had something going on, what were your feelings? In other words, what did you feel in your body that something is not quite right here? What was the beginning?
I had a friend that was a therapist, and she was as much a friend as she was a therapist. And I saw her when I was feeling just so incredibly low, and I had absolutely no energy. I was wanting to sleep all the time, and all the things that I just talked about. And I went to her, and I told her all the things that were happening to me. And she said, honey, you have depression. This is all the symptoms and signs of depression. And I remember feeling so completely relieved because it had a name. It was not in my head. It was something that was going on with me and against my chemistry. And it was just
treatable.
Yes, and it was treatable. And it was such a relief to know that it had a name.
Yeah. And I'll tell you this, I can notice now, she talked about her medicines, her body getting used to them. Every once in a while, like she said, about every 2 years or so, I can say, I feel like you're getting depressed again. I think your medicine's not working.
He sees it before I do,
yeah,
usually.
And of course, being the kind person she is, she doesn't lambaste me for saying that. She understands that I'm helping her. It's in her best interest to listen and contact her psychiatrist, and let's talk about the meds.
I want to say also that if you think you have depression, or if you know you have depression, be sure to stay with safe people. And when I say safe, I don't mean physically safe. I mean, there are many people out there, bless their hearts, they don't understand depression because they've never experienced depression. Maybe little episodes here and there, but it's not the same thing. But they truly don't understand. And many times, as much as you may love them, they're somewhat not safe for you emotionally because you feel like there's judgment involved with those people. So it's good to have people. That's why it's good to have a talk therapist, because you need someone who understands depression and someone who is safe to talk about your depression with.
Now, there's also situational depression. Now, that's a whole different ball
Yes.
game than clinical depression.
Yes.
What Debbie's talking about is clinical depression. Situational is when you've gone through a bad time, and again, you may be put on some of the antidepressant drugs for a while, but those are some of the things that you spur out from. Clinical depression, I don't guess you ever get over it.
Well, I'm never going to be able to come off of antidepressants and probably anti-anxiety medications.
Do those two go hand in hand always?
I don't know that they always go hand in hand, and I don't know about other people. I just know that anxiety is a part of my depression.
Well, I don't feel like you're a person that has self-esteem issues. I think you do, but I don't see that in you. But many times self-esteem issues go hand in hand with depression.
So. Well, I don't know which came first, the chicken or the egg, with self-esteem. I don't know if you just with depression feel so unworthy and so unloved. I don't know if that's the case, or whether you just have self-esteem issues and depression comes from that. I have had self-esteem issues a good part of my life. I feel like I'm beyond that at this point.
But there's still times, though, like even today, I think today you asked me, why do you love me? I mean, that comes up every once in a while. Yeah. It's like I don't, and the underlying statement that I get from that is I don't feel like I'm a lovable person, so why do you love me? You don't say that, but I kind of get that impression. Is that what you're thinking?
Maybe, yeah, maybe. Yeah. I think, I'm a good person. I try to be a good person, but why would you love me over someone else,
So depression is something that affects so many people.
It does.
Way more than admit it. And I've noticed in the last few years, I've talked to a lot of men who have come clean and said, hey, I've suffered from depression, I've had it. And I think for men especially, that's not a manly, quote unquote, manly thing to do. So many men now are realizing that it's okay to say that, it's okay to feel that way, and it's okay to get help. I think that's the main thing we're telling you today. It's okay to get help.
It absolutely
Talk to someone.
Imperative.
And it doesn't hurt to pray about it. My goodness, prayer is a great thing. Matter of fact, one of my friends, Sherry Baker, just posted this a minute ago, and I wrote it down. It said, worry is a conversation you have with yourself about things you cannot change. Prayer is a conversation you have with God about things He can change. And I think worry is a big part of depression.
Worry is a big part of depression, and I've been a big worrier all my life.
And as Anna, she mentioned the lady that she went to see that's a friend and a therapist as well. Anna one time told me, she said, you'll have to understand how Debbie operates. Debbie thinks the way it is right now is the way it's always going to be. Nothing's ever going to change to get better. And I have to constantly remind Debbie that the way it is today is not the way it's always going to be. Things will get better.
It just doesn't feel that way. It feels like this is forever. The way I feel right now is forever. And that feeds the depression. When, truth be known, if you take your medication and you talk to a therapist and you get an understanding spouse and an understanding group of friends around you, it can make all the difference in the world. It is treatable. It absolutely is treatable. It's epidemic in this nation, but it's also treatable. You don't have to suffer.
Yeah, Shane, I see where you say, I've been there, and David Jr., I see you said that too. I've been there. I think we've all been situationally there. I remember when I lost my business, had a big business going here in town, and I lost the business, and my marriage then failed, and I felt like, I remember telling God, I was going down the interstate one day, and I said, I'm not going to drive into that bridge abutment, but if something broke on my steering and I happened to hit it, I'm okay with it. And that's kind of a
feelings, yes.
Yeah, that's kind of a situational depression kind of thing. That's when you're thinking about ending it all, however means it could be. So have you had those thoughts?
I've had those thoughts over the years, yes. I've never thought seriously about killing myself, but I have thought that the world would probably be a better place without me. I even think about at my funeral, will anybody even show up at my funeral? And just thoughts like that. They're not healthy thoughts.
And they're not realistic thoughts.
And they're not really, well, yes, there's a lot in depression that's not realistic.
Yeah. So if you had one thing to say to people who are just feeling yucky and don't realize it, how would they know? Are there telltale signs that it might be depression and not just, like you mentioned, low energy? I mean, the symptoms you might have and not have depression. But what are those? Again, what are some of those symptoms that might be a trigger for someone?
Well, wanting to sleep a lot, or not being able to sleep at all. A lot of anxiety, a lot of worry. Just being listless and tired all the time. You feel like everyday problems that come down the pike, you just can't handle. You just cannot, you can't take anymore. You can't handle anymore. It's feeling hopeless and feeling unworthy. It's all of those things. If you have these symptoms, and they are symptoms, just like if you had a cold, your nose would be running and you would have a sore throat. These are symptoms of depression. If you have these symptoms, by all means, see a doctor, tell them the symptoms, tell them that you think you have depression, and get a referral to a psychiatrist to get the proper medication that's going to work together. You don't want a hit or miss situation, and I think many times that's kind of what happens with family doctors, is they just try something, and I know you've got to have a starting point, and you've got to try something to see if it's going to work, but psychiatrists are just better equipped to handle depression, and don't feel ashamed that you have a psychiatrist that manages your meds. It's no more embarrassing than if you had a gastroenterologist that was handling your gut issues.
Insulin, or if you're a diabetic
right.
who needs insulin, she needs certain chemicals that her body doesn't produce.
My body does not produce enough serotonin. And so the synapses are not making connections like they do with normal people, non-depressed people.
Don't say normal.
Well,
that's unfair.
That's unfair.
That's unfair to
You're
you.
Right. Well, with people without depression.
Yeah, people without depression. Right. And now there's a big difference between depression and bipolar, which is manic depression.
That's right.
That's a whole different ball game right
is.
there. When you're bipolar and you have the Debbie's never had a manic moment, I don't think.
No.
It's always been depressive.
Right.
But when you have the manic depressive, that I have experience with that, and that is not personally, but with someone, and that is a whole different ball game, and that elevates you to a whole different level. That's up there with, well, I'm not going to characterize, but it's different than depression. Just put it that way.
If you feel like you have any mental issue, it is not embarrassing or beneath you in any way to go and seek out answers and seek out medications. Thank God we have insulin for diabetics. But we have antidepressants and anti-anxiety medications for those people who suffer with those symptoms.
And there are new ones coming out all the time that have less side effects.
Right.
And there are even some like, I think Cymbalta or one of those medicines like that help the antidepressants
it's like
to work better.
Abilify is one of those medications that is kind of a booster. And I do take one of those that helps to boost my antidepressant medication. So, like I say, a psychiatrist is the person who knows about all these things.
I'm so proud of you for talking about this tonight. You've helped a lot of people. Thank you.
You're welcome.
I was going to go into a series tonight on self-esteem and talk about that, but I think we're going to leave it at this tonight. That's enough to digest. I understand. Yeah, David, I understand. Man, the struggle is real for those that suffer with it. Fortunately, I don't have that, but I'm glad that I am partnered, or glad Debbie is partnered with someone that doesn't. Can you imagine two depressed people in the same relationship would be a tough thing.
Yes.
So we do help each other out, and it's worked out well. Mm-hmm. So I'm going to leave it at that. Next week we'll dig into self-esteem and talk a little bit about that. They kind of go hand in hand, But that's a whole separate issue. We're going to talk about self-esteem and how to get it, what to do with it, and how come you don't have it. We're going to talk about all that next week. It's Your Life Matters, and send us questions at yourlifematters@gmail.com. Your Life Matters, right? At gmail.com. And send us questions. If you have something you want us to discuss, we'll be happy to talk about it. If Debbie and I don't have an opinion, we probably had it happen to us or done it. So we're happy to pass along what little. We're not counselors, we're not doctors, we're not anything except just people who've lived a lot.
Well, I want to thank everyone who's viewed tonight. I consider you safe people that I would love to befriend. So I appreciate you being on and hearing what I had to say tonight.
Yeah, and thanks to Debbie for being here. That took a lot of guts. She was ambivalent about being on here tonight.
Very.
So I appreciate it. Appreciate all of you tuning in. Thank you so much. Remember, these are all on our YouTube channel at Your Life Matters on YouTube. So they're there. If you want to send somebody over to the YouTube channel and have them look at it, it's always there. So thank you very much. Little David, I see where you want to send Debbie a message.
Please
Listen,
do.
she'll be happy to talk with you. I know you've had some problems, and we would love to talk with you and try to help you out with that. So, guys, thank you so much. Thanks for tuning in tonight and listening to my ramblings and Debbie's profound statements. And we'll see you again next Sunday night at 8 o'clock, okay?